I never imagined that a quiet Thursday evening could feel like a powder keg, ready to explode at the slightest spark. Yet there I was, standing in the dimly lit kitchen of our suburban home, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. When I first realized that some desires, no matter how forbidden, have a way of clawing their way into the open. It started innocently enough, or at least it appeared so at first. I was making coffee, the bitter aroma filling the air, when I heard her laugh. It was soft, almost musical, carrying through the hallway like a secret that wanted to be shared. My heart jumped, though I tried to convince myself it was nothing more than a pang of familial concern. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. She was sitting on the edge of the staircase, legs crossed, leaning forward slightly as she scrolled on her phone. Her hair fell in loose waves over one shoulder, catching the dim kitchen light. I had seen her like this hundreds of times before, and each time I told myself I was imagining things. She was my stepdaughter, barely 18, and my mind knew the rules. Yet my body betrayed me in subtle ways, quickened pulse, a tension in my chest that I could not shake. I caught myself staring, my fingers gripping the coffee mug tighter than necessary. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine, and for a fleeting second, a spark passed between us. I couldn't define it. It wasn't exactly attraction, or at least I tried to deny that it was. It was something more primal, something that whispered danger and excitement all at once. "You made coffee?" she asked, her voice casual but soft. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my tone steady, though the tremor in my chest betrayed my calm. "Do you want some?" She shook her head, still smiling, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll just grab water. But thanks." I watched her leave the kitchen, her steps light and purposeful. And then it happened, an almost magnetic pull that I couldn't explain. It wasn't lust in the way most would recognize it. It was curiosity, fascination, a dangerous temptation that I knew I should resist. And yet, part of me wanted to follow her, to know her secrets, to be closer in ways that I would never admit out loud. Now, before I continue, I should warn you, what I'm about to share isn't for the faint of heart. This story is dark, twisted, and filled with the kind of secrets that can destroy lives. If you want to see how it all unfolds, I'd ask you to subscribe, like this video, and stay with me. Believe me, you won't want to miss a single moment. It wasn't long before our interactions began to shift subtly. At first, it was small things, a shared laugh over something trivial, an accidental brush of hands while reaching for the same book, lingering glances that neither of us acknowledged but both of us felt. I tried to ignore it, rationalize it, pretend it didn't exist. But the more I resisted, the more tangible it became, like electricity waiting to strike. She was clever, of course. She had always been clever, quick-witted, confident, and sharp as a tack. She knew how to get under my skin without saying a word. I found myself drawn to her intelligence, her humor, her presence. Every conversation was a game, every smile a challenge. And I, for reasons I could barely understand, wanted to play along, wanted to see how far this dangerous connection could go. It was during one of these ordinary evenings that things almost tipped over the edge. I was in the living room, finishing some paperwork, when she appeared, asking if she could borrow my laptop for a school project. I nodded, gesturing toward the dining table. She sat down beside me, close enough that I felt her warmth brush against my arm. My breath caught for a moment, and I cursed myself silently. We worked in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds the tapping of keys and the occasional sigh from frustration. Then she looked at me, her eyes serious, almost probing. "Do you ever feel like some things are meant to be kept secret?" she asked. I paused, unsure how to answer. The question lingered in the air like a warning I didn't want to hear. "Sometimes," I said cautiously, "but some secrets aren't meant to be shared." Her lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I guess it depends on who you're talking to," she said softly. The way she said it, the tone in her voice, it sent shivers down my spine. I wanted to say something, to warn her, to push back the strange tension building between us. But I didn't. I couldn't. There was a magnetic pull I couldn't resist. And in that moment, I realized that the boundary we both knew existed was slipping, almost imperceptibly. That night, after she left the room, I found myself replaying every word, every glance, every laugh. The house felt emptier somehow, the silence heavier. I told myself it was just imagination, a fleeting temptation. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It was the beginning of something dangerous, something I couldn't stop, even if I wanted to. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us grew. I found myself inventing reasons to spend time with her, to be near her, to feel that electric charge whenever our paths crossed. And she, whether knowingly or not, fed into it, teasing and challenging me in ways that were both innocent and intoxicating. I can't tell you exactly when I realized it was more than a fleeting crush, more than a dangerous thought. Perhaps it was the way she laughed at something I said that no one else seemed to understand, or the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Whatever it was, I knew one thing. This was a line I should never cross. Yet, temptation has a way of whispering in the quietest moments, of nudging you toward decisions you know you'll regret. I started keeping a journal, writing down thoughts I couldn't speak aloud. I documented fleeting touches, secret smiles, moments of shared laughter that meant more than they should. It was my confession, my outlet, my own twisted therapy. Now, if you've made it this far, let me remind you, like, subscribe, and share this video if you're ready for the full story. The events I'm about to reveal will shock you, disturb you, and haunt you. But they're the truth, raw and unfiltered. It all began innocently, or at least that's what I told myself. A smile here, a glance there. Nothing more than fleeting moments in a suburban household. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Every interaction carried the weight of unspoken desires. Every conversation a subtle push towards something we both knew we shouldn't explore. And so, the trap was set. I didn't know it then, but each choice, each glance, each tiny act of forbidden curiosity was leading us down a path that could not be undone. The suburban streets, the quiet neighborhood, the seemingly perfect home, all of it was a mask. Behind closed doors, behind polite smiles and casual greetings, desire was building, a force neither of us could control. By the end of that first month, I had to admit to myself something terrifying. I was hooked, not on her in the way a man should love a woman, but on the tension, the thrill, the forbidden nature of what was happening. Every encounter left me both exhilarated and terrified, a prisoner of my own emotions. And somewhere, deep down, I knew that nothing could remain secret forever. Secrets have a way of unraveling, of taking on a life of their own. And I had no idea how quickly ours would. But for now, we continued to play our dangerous game. I watched her from across the room, from across the dinner table, from fleeting glimpses in the hallway, feeling the pull that I couldn't resist. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and utterly consuming. I should have stopped. I should have walked away. But temptation, once recognized, has a way of following you into every room, every thought, every heartbeat, and I was powerless to resist it. Little did I know, that spark, the one that almost went too far that first night, was only the beginning. It would ignite a fire that could not be contained, a fire that would burn everything in its path, leaving nothing but ashes and regret. And that, dear reader, is where our story truly begins. The days that followed that first spark felt like walking a tightrope stretched across a canyon. One false move, one careless glance, and everything could come crashing down. Yet, somehow, the more careful I tried to be, the more I found myself slipping into the gravity of it. It started innocently, or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. A shared cup of coffee, lingering in conversation longer than necessary. A book she asked to borrow, and instead of handing it over quickly, I found excuses to linger. Every touch was accidental. Every glance held just a little too long. And with each fleeting moment, I felt the danger wrapping around me like a velvet rope, soft and alluring yet impossible to ignore. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, running through the same thoughts over and over. The way she laughed, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way her voice, soft, teasing, unpredictable, made my heart thump. I hated myself for noticing these things, for allowing my imagination to wander down paths I would never admit to anyone. And yet, I couldn't stop. Some nights, I would catch myself imagining her sitting next to me in the dim glow of the living room, closer than she should ever be, our hands brushing in casual coincidence, the warmth of her presence, the forbidden thrill of knowing that she might notice, might sense the shift, the tension. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. I knew I should resist. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to pull back, to create distance. to shut this door before it opened into something irreversible. But temptation has a cruel way of whispering at the right time, of making you think that one more moment won't matter. And I found myself listening. She was clever, dangerously clever. I began to notice it more and more. The way she laughed at a joke only I understood. The sly smile she gave when our eyes met just a fraction too long. It was as if she had a sixth sense for the dangerous energy between us, for the pull we both knew we shouldn't explore. And I wondered, sometimes with a pang of guilt, whether she felt it too. It started with small things. She would linger in the kitchen while I was making dinner, watching me, talking to me casually. Yet there was something unspoken in the air. A brush of the shoulder, a shared look, a laugh that held more meaning than it should. And I, foolishly, allowed myself to be drawn in, to want more, even as every rational part of me screamed to step back. One evening, she came into the living room while I was reading. I didn't notice her at first, lost in the words of a novel that seemed almost trivial compared to the tension in the air. Then she spoke, her voice low, teasing. "Do you ever wonder about things you shouldn't?" I looked up, startled, and met her gaze. The question was casual, innocent in tone, but there was an edge to it, a knowingness that sent a shiver down my spine. "Sometimes," I said cautiously, careful not to give too much away, "but some things aren't meant to be explored." She tilted her head, considering me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe some things are just waiting for the right moment." Her words were like a spark in a dry forest. My mind raced, imagining the possibilities, the forbidden paths, the dangerous games we were playing. I knew I should tell her to stop, should pull back and reclaim some semblance of control. But I didn't. I couldn't. And that, I realized, was the first time I truly understood the power of desire. Not lust, not physical longing, but something far more dangerous: fascination, obsession, the pull of something forbidden that grows stronger with each passing day. We started spending more time together, though we never acknowledged it. Homework sessions that lasted longer than necessary. Walks in the neighborhood that felt like stolen moments. Shared conversations that skirted the edge of intimacy. Each encounter left me shaken, exhilarated, terrified. I began to rationalize my behavior in the quiet of my mind. She was clever, independent, aware. She wasn't naive. And yet, I found myself drawn to her in ways I couldn't define, ways I knew were wrong. I hated myself for it, for wanting her, for craving the tension, but I couldn't stop. Then came the night that changed everything. I was in the study, grading papers for work, when she knocked lightly on the door. I barely had time to respond before she slipped inside, carrying her laptop. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the desk lamp. She set the laptop down beside me and sat on the edge of the desk, close enough that our knees touched. "Can you help me with this?" she asked, her voice soft, almost casual. But there was something in the way she looked at me, something deliberate, and I felt my pulse spike. I nodded, trying to keep my composure, my hands steady even as my mind screamed at me to leave, to step back, to remember the rules. But I didn't. I leaned over the laptop, guiding her through a complicated assignment. Our heads close, our shoulders brushing. For a moment, I imagined what it would be like to cross the line, to give in to the tension that had been building for weeks. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying, and I pushed it away, focusing on the work in front of us. Yet, even as I tried to remain professional, I couldn't ignore the way she looked at me, the subtle smile playing on her lips, the way she seemed to lean just a little closer. Every instinct screamed at me to resist, to move away, to reclaim the boundary I had long since abandoned. But I was powerless. It was during that session that I realized just how far I had fallen. The obsession wasn't just in my mind anymore. It was in every glance, every brush of hands, every shared moment. And I knew, deep down, that it would only get worse. She left the room eventually, giving me a quick smile and a thanks that felt heavier than it should. I watched her go, my heart racing, my mind in turmoil. The quiet of the study felt suffocating after she left, as if the very air was charged with the energy she carried. I knew I should feel shame, guilt, fear, and I did in small doses. But more than that, I felt anticipation. I wanted to see her again, to feel the tension, to navigate the dangerous dance we were performing. And I hated myself for it. Weeks passed like this, a delicate balance of desire and restraint. Every encounter was a test, every conversation a minefield. I began keeping a journal of our interactions, documenting moments that no one else would understand, moments that I could never share. It was my confession, my secret, my outlet for the dangerous thoughts that threatened to consume me. And then, just when I thought I could maintain control, she pushed further. It was late one night, and I was in the living room, reading. She appeared quietly, carrying a blanket and a book. She sat beside me, close enough that I could feel her warmth, and opened the book with a soft sigh. "Can we read together?" she asked, her voice low, teasing. I hesitated, knowing the danger, knowing that every second spent this close was another step down a path I shouldn't take. But I nodded, and we read in silence, the only sound the turning of pages. Every so often, our shoulders brushed, our knees touched, and I felt the tension building to a point that was almost unbearable. By the time she left, I was shaking, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't speak aloud. The obsession had taken root fully now, a dangerous, uncontrollable force. I knew it wouldn't be long before we crossed a line that could never be undone. Now, let me pause for a moment to remind you. If you've been following this story, like, subscribe, and share. The twists ahead are darker, more dangerous, and will keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every interaction, every glance, every accidental touch. I knew I was in too deep, caught in a web of forbidden desire that I couldn't escape. And yet, part of me didn't want to escape. Part of me wanted to see how far we could go, wanted to explore the dangerous tension that had been building between us. She had become the center of my thoughts, the focal point of my obsession. Every day, every moment, every heartbeat seemed to revolve around her presence. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. Because once desire takes hold, once forbidden fascination becomes obsession, it doesn't release you easily. It grows, consuming everything in its path, leaving only a trail of chaos and inevitable tragedy. And that, dear reader, is the truth. I never thought a single smile could hold so much power. Yet hers did. Every glance, every gesture, every word carried a weight that I could neither ignore nor resist. By now, the tension between us had grown into something tangible, something that filled every quiet moment of my life. It was no longer curiosity or fleeting fascination. It was a slow, consuming obsession that I feared even thinking about. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, as if we were both testing the limits of what could be allowed. Homework sessions became longer. Casual conversations lingered in the evenings when no one else was around. I found excuses to be near her, to feel that strange, magnetic pull that both thrilled and terrified me. The other night, for example, she had asked me to help with a research project. I had agreed, of course, because refusing her request would have felt unnatural, almost cruel. But as she leaned over the desk to show me her notes, our shoulders touched in a way that was accidental only on the surface. Every nerve in my body screamed, warning me to step back. Yet I didn't. I couldn't. We sat in silence for a few moments, and I noticed the way she was watching me, as if studying me, testing me. I realized then that she knew, somehow, that something between us was changing. And perhaps, in her own way, she was feeding it, pushing me closer to the edge of what was allowed. I told myself repeatedly that I had to stop, that this was wrong, that even thinking about crossing a line could ruin everything. And yet, each time she smiled at me, laughed at a joke no one else would understand, or brushed against my hand accidentally, I found myself rationalizing it, justifying the desire I knew I shouldn't feel. It was during one of those late-night sessions that I first realized just how dangerous our connection had become. The house was quiet, my spouse away at a work event, leaving just the two of us. She had her laptop open, papers scattered across the desk, and she looked up at me with those curious eyes, the kind that seemed too aware of everything. "I don't get this part," she said softly, pointing to a paragraph that didn't make sense to her. I leaned closer to explain, my shoulder brushing against hers. I felt her inhale sharply, though I wasn't sure if it was from frustration with the assignment or something else entirely. "Here," I whispered, guiding her hand over the notes. Our fingers touched lightly, and for a moment, I imagined what it would be like if the contact lasted longer, if we allowed ourselves to step beyond the invisible boundary we had been circling for weeks. And then, as if sensing my thought, She looked up at me with that faint, knowing smile. I felt a jolt, a surge of adrenaline that left me breathless. I knew she was aware of the tension between us. I also knew she was not entirely innocent in it. Our interactions became more intense in the following weeks. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally. She would seek me out for advice, for help, for moments of quiet companionship that seemed to carry more weight than they should. Every word, every gesture, seemed layered with meaning, with hidden intent, with something unspoken yet understood by both of us. I kept a journal during this time, documenting every interaction, every fleeting glance, every accidental touch. I called it my confession, my secret archive, my way of coping with the dangerous thoughts that threatened to consume me. Writing it down didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made me realize just how deep I had fallen. And then the games began. She would tease me subtly, asking questions that seemed innocent but carried double meanings. She would linger in doorways, pause in hallways, brush past me in ways that seemed accidental yet deliberate. I found myself reading into every movement, every word, every sigh, and imagining scenarios that were both exhilarating and terrifying. I remember one evening clearly. We were in the kitchen, making tea. I was focused on the kettle when she stepped behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her body. She rested her hands lightly on the counter, leaning over slightly to watch me. The smell of her shampoo filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of vanilla from the tea. "Do you ever think about things you shouldn't?" she asked casually. I froze, my hands gripping the kettle tighter than necessary. I didn't look at her immediately, focusing instead on the mundane act of pouring hot water into a cup. But the tension in her voice, the subtle weight behind the words, made my pulse race. "Sometimes," I replied cautiously, my voice low. "But some things aren't meant to be explored." She tilted her head, studying me. "Maybe. Or maybe some things are just waiting for the right moment." Her words struck me like lightning. The right moment for what? I didn't ask. I couldn't. Instead, I nodded, pretending to be absorbed in the tea, though every nerve in my body was alert, every thought consumed by the dangerous tension that had become our reality. By now, I knew we were both dancing on the edge of a precipice. Every interaction, every conversation, every glance was a step closer to something we both knew we shouldn't explore. And yet, neither of us stopped. It was a silent agreement, a tacit understanding that the forbidden was too intoxicating to resist. I started noticing patterns in her behavior, subtle signals that made my pulse quicken. The way she leaned slightly closer when she wanted something, the way she let her hand linger near mine, the way her eyes would lock with mine in moments that felt charged with meaning. It was dangerous, addictive, and entirely consuming. Then came the night that would forever change the course of our story. I was in the study, grading papers, when she appeared, carrying her laptop. She set it down beside me and sat on the edge of the desk, close enough that our knees touched. I felt a jolt run through me, a mixture of fear, desire, and something darker I couldn't name. "Can you help me with this?" she asked softly. I nodded, leaning over the laptop. Our shoulders brushed again, our heads close as we examined her work. The air between us was charged, electric, and I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. For a brief moment, I imagined what it would be like to cross the line, to act on the forbidden tension that had been building for weeks. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Even as I told myself to stay composed, to maintain the boundary, I knew it was slipping, eroding with every accidental touch, every shared glance, every moment alone. And I realized, with a chilling certainty, that once a line like this is crossed, there's no turning back. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance, a game of risk and temptation. We continued to push boundaries subtly, exploring the edges of what was allowed without ever acknowledging the growing obsession between us. I found myself thinking about her constantly, planning excuses to be near her, craving the moments when we were alone, even for a few minutes. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. Desire had taken root, and it was growing, spreading through my thoughts like wildfire. And with it came fear, the fear of being caught, of losing control, of stepping too far and destroying everything I had left. Some nights, I would lie awake, replaying every interaction, analyzing every glance, imagining what might happen if we gave in to the tension. It was exhilarating and terrifying, A dangerous cocktail that left me both excited and paralyzed. And now, dear reader, if you're still with me, I remind you, like, share, and subscribe. The story is about to take darker turns, and the consequences of our obsession will become impossible to ignore. Because desire, once ignited, does not remain quiet. It grows, consumes, and ultimately demands a reckoning. And I was about to learn just how true that could be. The house felt different after that night. Thicker, heavier, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. I walked through the hallways and noticed the smallest details, the way a shadow fell across the floor, the faint creak of a hinge, the echo of a laugh that was no longer innocent. Something had shifted, and I could feel it deep in my chest. I knew it wasn't just my imagination. The tension between us had grown from subtle glances and accidental touches into something far more dangerous, something that could no longer be ignored. I had tried to tell myself we were just testing limits, exploring boundaries. But deep down, I knew the truth. We had crossed a line, even if we hadn't admitted it out loud. It began subtly. She would linger in rooms longer than necessary, find excuses to be near me, her presence a constant pull I couldn't resist. And I, foolishly, let it happen. I craved it. I needed it. Every fiber of my being was drawn to her, even as my mind screamed at me to run, to escape before it was too late. One evening, the air itself seemed charged with something unspoken. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes after dinner, when I heard the faint sound of her footsteps behind me. I didn't turn immediately, trying to focus on the mundane task at hand. But then I felt it, the proximity, the warmth of her body close to mine, and the faint scent of her perfume that lingered in the air. "Do you ever feel trapped?" she asked, her voice soft, almost a whisper. I froze, the dish in my hands slippery with soapy water. Trapped? In what sense, I wondered, in my life, in my thoughts, or in the dangerous tension we had allowed to grow unchecked? In some ways, I replied cautiously. My voice sounded small, even to me. But we all feel trapped sometimes. She tilted her head, studying me, her eyes like mirrors reflecting a part of myself I didn't want to see. "Sometimes, I think people hide behind walls they build themselves," she said. "And maybe the wrong person gets close, and everything comes crashing down." Her words were innocent in tone, but loaded with meaning. I didn't respond immediately, unsure what to say. And yet, I felt the truth in her observation. Everything had been building toward a collapse, a moment where the fragile balance we maintained would shatter. Weeks passed in this dangerous limbo. Every day, every interaction became a test of control, a push against boundaries that had long since ceased to exist. I found myself anticipating her presence, craving it, even as fear gripped my chest. Then the incident happened. I will never forget the way it unfolded. The sound, the sight, the overwhelming panic that followed. It was late, past midnight, and I was in the study, reviewing documents for work. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears and makes every small noise seem amplified. I heard a soft crash from the hallway, followed by a muffled cry. My heart raced, and I ran toward the sound, only to find her standing over the lifeless body of our neighbor. A look of shock and something darker in her eyes. Time froze. My mind could not process what I was seeing. She hadn't been discovered, hadn't been caught. Yet there she was, holding a knife, standing over blood that reflected the dim light of the hallway. I wanted to scream, to run, to intervene. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed by a mixture of fear, disbelief, and the lingering obsession that had bound me to her in ways I could not explain. "Stay back," she whispered, her voice calm but tinged with an unsettling authority. "You don't understand." I did not move. I couldn't. I could only watch as she wiped the blade clean, her movements methodical, precise, almost ritualistic. The danger, the forbidden energy, the tension that had grown between us. It had manifested into something real, something horrifying. After that night, everything changed. The quiet, the tension, the subtle games we had played, none of it mattered anymore. The shadow of that murder loomed over us, over the house, over every interaction. And yet, she remained anonymous, untouched by suspicion, while I carried the weight of knowledge, the burden of silence. I began to notice small changes in her behavior. She was distant at times, reflective, almost detached, and then suddenly intense, focused, a predator in human form. I realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had always been clever, always aware, and that she had orchestrated events with a precision that left me both terrified and mesmerized. Our interactions continued, but they were different now. There was no longer a playful tension, no teasing glances or subtle touches. Instead, there was a cold understanding, an unspoken agreement that we were bound together by a secret too dangerous to speak. Every word, every look carried weight, and I became hyper-aware of her every movement, every sigh, every glance. I hated myself for it, for being drawn to her even after witnessing the horror she was capable of. And yet, I couldn't break free. Desire, obsession, fear, they were intertwined in a way that left me powerless. It was during this period that I realized something crucial. The tragedy was not in what had already happened, but in the inevitability of what was to come. Secrets have a way of unraveling, of consuming everything in their path. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that our secret, the dangerous, forbidden connection that had begun innocently, would demand a price. And then, as if to remind me, she spoke one night while we were alone in the study. "Do you ever think about how fragile everything is?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the floor. "One small mistake, one wrong move, and everything collapses." I wanted to answer, to tell her to stop, to walk away before it was too late. But I couldn't. My voice caught in my throat. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. The obsession, the danger, the thrill, it had me trapped. I nodded slowly, understanding all too well. "Yes," I whispered. "And sometimes it's already too late." Weeks blurred together after that. Fear became routine, and the thrill of danger was intertwined with my obsession. Every glance, every word, every interaction was a reminder of the secret we carried, the shadow that loomed over everything we had built. At times, I imagined confessing, telling someone, seeking relief from the weight of knowledge. But I never did. I couldn't. The secret was ours alone, and it had a power over me that I could not resist. Now, dear reader, if you're still with me, I remind you, like, share, and subscribe. The story is about to reach its darkest moments, and the consequences of obsession will become unavoidable. You won't want to miss how the final threads unravel. It was during these weeks that I began to see her for what she truly was: brilliant, manipulative, and terrifyingly self-aware. Every smile, every question, every look carried a dual meaning. She was playing a game, and I was both a willing participant and a helpless pawn. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. The tragedy we were living was not a mistake, but a consequence of desire, obsession, and the dangerous allure of forbidden connection. And there was no turning back. I knew then that the shadow of that night, the murder, the secret, the tension, would follow me forever. Every choice, every thought, every heartbeat would be haunted by what we had done and what we had become. The fire had been ignited, and it would not be extinguished. The silence in the house was heavier than any sound I had ever heard. After that night, everything had changed, not just the way I saw her, but the way I saw myself. The obsession, the tension, the forbidden attraction that had consumed me for months had transformed into a shadow that clung to my every thought, my every action. I couldn't escape it. I tried, in small ways, keeping busy, focusing on work, taking walks in the neighborhood, anything to push her from my mind. But the truth was unavoidable. She had become the center of my life, the axis around which my thoughts revolved. Even though I knew it was wrong, even though I knew it was dangerous, she moved through the house with a quiet confidence that terrified me. It was the same grace, the same awareness, the same subtle control she had wielded from the beginning. But now it carried weight, a silent reminder of the night that had changed everything. I couldn't tell anyone, couldn't speak to anyone about it. The secret was ours, a dark bond forged in silence and fear. Days turned into weeks, and the house felt like a pressure cooker. Every glance, every conversation, every small interaction carried a charged energy, the echoes of danger lingering in the air. I watched her carefully, noting the way she moved, the way she spoke, the way she seemed to understand the unspoken rules that governed us. And I hated myself for it. I hated myself for wanting her, for craving her presence, for being drawn back into the web of forbidden attraction even after witnessing the horror she was capable of. The memory of that night, the blood, the silence, the The realization of what she had done haunted me relentlessly. I could not forget it, could not erase it, could not escape it. It was during one of those long, sleepless nights that I realized the true danger of obsession. Desire, once ignited, does not remain contained. It spreads, it consumes, and it leaves only destruction in its wake. And I had been consumed. I tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, interacting with her as if nothing had happened, pretending that we were just stepfather and stepdaughter, navigating the mundane routines of life. But the tension was always there, a silent predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Every word, every gesture, every glance carried the weight of what had transpired and what was inevitable. There were moments when I thought about confessing, about seeking relief from the burden of knowledge. But fear of losing everything, of being exposed, of facing the consequences, kept my mouth shut. The secret was ours alone, and it held power over me that I could not resist. She seemed to sense it too. She would watch me sometimes with a look that was both innocent and knowing, her eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that left me unsettled. It was as if she knew that I could never break free, that I was trapped by my own obsession, and perhaps, in some twisted way, she reveled in it. I began keeping a journal again, documenting every interaction, every thought, every moment of tension. It was my outlet, my way of processing the madness that had consumed my life. But even in writing, I could not find relief. The words only reminded me of the inescapable truth: desire, once awakened, is a fire that cannot be contained. Then came the night that I had dreaded, the moment I had known would arrive from the very beginning. It was quiet, the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. I was in the living room, pretending to read, when she appeared, carrying herself with a calmness that belied the chaos that had defined our months together. She sat across from me, her expression unreadable, and for a long moment, we simply looked at each other, the air thick with unspoken tension. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice soft but deliberate, "about everything that's happened, and everything that will happen." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. I knew what she meant. The secret, the murder, the obsession, it had been building toward a climax, a reckoning that we could not avoid. "What are you thinking?" I asked cautiously, trying to maintain control, trying to keep the boundary that had long since eroded. "That we can't keep pretending," she replied. "That the tension, the danger, the attraction, it's too much, and it's changing us." I nodded slowly, my heart pounding. I knew she was right. The obsession had become a force beyond our control, a shadow that tainted every interaction, every thought, every heartbeat. And now, it demanded resolution. I didn't know what she planned, but I sensed the inevitability of tragedy, the tension that had consumed us for months, the forbidden desire, the silent games. It was about to culminate in something irreversible, and it did. The events of that night are etched into my mind with a clarity that haunts me. I watched as she acted decisively, with a precision and calmness that left me both terrified and mesmerized. The consequences of our obsession unfolded before me, unstoppable, inevitable, and tragic. I could do nothing but witness it, trapped by my own complicity, my own desires, my own obsession. When it was over, the house was silent. The shadows seemed to grow longer, darker, as if mourning the events that had transpired. I sat in the living room for hours, trying to process what had happened, trying to make sense of the chaos, trying to understand how desire, obsession, and secrecy could lead to such devastation. And yet, even in the aftermath, the dangerous allure remained. The obsession that had begun innocently, the tension that had escalated subtly, the forbidden attraction that had grown into a consuming force, it lingered, a shadow that refused to leave. I realized then that the tragedy was not just in the events themselves, but in the obsession that had fueled them. Desire, once awakened, does not simply vanish. It transforms, it mutates, it leaves scars that never heal. And I had been marked forever. I have tried to warn others, to caution anyone who might stumble upon the story, to make them understand the power of forbidden desire and obsession. But I know that words can only do so much. The truth, the darkness, the inevitability of consequences, these are lessons that must be learned through experience. Now, dear reader, if you've followed this story to its conclusion, I ask you one final time: like, share, and subscribe. The events you've read are not just a story. They are a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangerous power of obsession, the fragile nature of desire, and the consequences that follow when boundaries are crossed. I remain here, trapped by my own choices, haunted by the memory of her, and by the knowledge of what we have done. The house is quiet, but the shadow of that obsession lingers, a constant reminder that some desires are too dangerous to indulge, that some secrets are too dark to reveal, and that once you cross certain lines, there is no returning. The fire that began with a glance, a smile, a fleeting touch, it has burned everything in its path, and all that remains are the ashes of obsession, the weight of secrets, and the unending echo of a tragedy that could never be undone. I look back now, and I see how it all started, how the tension, the fascination, the dangerous attraction spiraled into the horror that followed. And I know, with a certainty that chills me, that nothing could have stopped it, not reason, not guilt, not fear. Once desire and obsession take hold, they demand a price. And that price is always paid in tragedy.